everyone. Welcome to our first of hopefully many conversations with coaches and trainers and essentially Agile, Scrum, Kanban, and project management experts at Simpliaxis. And these conversations are going to be based on the questions that we get during our training sessions. We'll sort of pick up some themes, and the idea is to share our thinking, opinions, even recommendations, suggestions. Some of them might be even maybe a bit contrarian to each other. But the point is this: we'll be having some free-flowing conversations, and we hope there are some nuggets that you can take back and maybe experiment with your teams. So without further ado, one thing that we picked for this time was there's a question that comes quite a bit, even though a lot of the teams are familiar with it, but what sort of estimation should Agile teams be doing? And this is a broad topic, so we'll keep it open-ended and we'll have a conversation around estimation and, and we have two experts on our panel, Vishwa and Akash. So Vishwa, if you want to just quickly go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vivek and Akash. Yeah, my name is Dr. Vishwa, and yes, I've been part of Simpliaxis for a while. I'm in the industry almost 20 plus years and worked with the healthcare and the banking, of course, oil and gas, and some of federal organization have implemented Agile in the multiple domain. I'm happy for the discussions with you guys, Vivek and Akash. So, Akash, over to you.
Thanks, guys, for doing this. Hi, everybody. I'm Akash. I'm an agile coach and a trainer as well. I've been in the corporate space for about a little over 20 years now, so very much like Vishwa, I'd say. Started off in the engineering side and then just kind of worked my way through the different ranks of engineering. Did a lot of consulting and eventually got into training and coaching and things like that. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Akash. Thanks, guys. So just to sort of similar background here as well. So close to 20 years of experience in this space, having worked in different spaces. But my background was in scientific research. So started there, shifted to IT, held different roles, and now been consulting, doing coaching and training. So been close to 20 years now. Now, with that, let's just jump right in. Now this is something. So actually, I'm in the middle of training right now. Day one is over. Tomorrow is going to be day two, and the conversation just started today. And I said to the group that let's talk about estimation tomorrow. And there were a bunch of questions on the mural board around estimation. That how do we do this? What about story points? What about this? And what is the best practice? And this is something that. I'm sure that you guys would have also seen over the years, these questions come up. So I would just open this up to, anyone that would like to sort of start off with some opening remarks, and then, we can sort of add on to what we think about estimation in general.
Yeah, I'll say a couple things just to get the conversation rolling. So, like you said, Vivek, I'm sure Vishwa has seen this in his classes as well. Oftentimes, depending on the line of work people come from, the questions around estimation tend to be around the confidence and the predictability of that estimate. And how many times are you going to be spot on? And then that opens up a debate around how accurate you are versus how precise you are, because you can't always be precise, but you can probably be in the ballpark of things. The more information you have at your disposal, the easier it becomes for you to estimate and be precise with things. So there are so many techniques out there that people use, whether they use these aggregated made up things like points or t-shirt sizes, or they actually just look at things in units of time. I think at the end of the day, the the more you know about something, the easier it is to guess whether it'll take the same amount of time. The less you know about it, the better, I think, or at least I've found it to be, if you step away from it and not look at the precision of it, but look at the general ballpark, which is where people get into these points and t-shirt sizes, right? So a point could be a subjective interpretation of how difficult somebody thinks something is. But it's the age-old example of, how much time will it take you to run a mile? So it might take me 10 minutes, might take somebody else 5 minutes, but at least we can both agree that it's a mile of a distance. and the volume of work could be different, but the complexity over a period of time, at least to a certain extent, can be aligned on, if you will. The one thing, and I'll stop with this, and I'm curious to hear both of you guys' thoughts on this. The one thing that I often see, and sometimes it becomes a sort of a rookie level mistake from Scrum masters or even engineering managers, if you will, is comparison across two metric systems. So if
Mm-hmm.
they use points and they use time, or they use t-shirt sizes and points, they start to compare those and try to build some sort of a relationship between them. So they'll say like 1 point equals to this much time, or 5 t-shirt sizes equals to this much time.
Yeah.
And the thing that I've always struggled to explain to people, because no matter how many times I say it, it still remains in the muscle memory a certain way, is if you can't estimate in terms of time, then your next best friend is estimating in something that's a little more vague. So if you go for points, then your goal is to estimate the number of points you can do over time. But if you
Mm.
convert points to time, then your graph of points over time just collapses on itself, because the
True.
x-axis is set, it is time. The y-axis has to be something other than time. But if the y-axis also is time, then you're just measuring time over time. And that's fundamentally, mathematically speaking, at least says that at a basic level, you can't compare or you can't equate the y and the x-axis. So points have to be separate from something that's on the x-axis. But I see people making these mistakes over and over again. They keep tripping on each other. I'm curious, what do you think, Vishwa? Have you seen something similar?
Yeah, it's in similar, right? Again, people they just go with the bucket system, right? It's a bucket system. Again, go with the Fibonacci scales and also like the so mathematically speaking, I like the word what you mentioned about mathematics, but the problem is when it comes to reality, people they face many challenges to implement that. Of course, we know that the small, medium, extra small, the things, right? So, but the thing is, the problem is in the industry, what I faced, right? So people they just go with the different parameters, like sometimes the dot voting, the silent grouping, right? So I don't know why silent grouping is required here, right? So again, I would say that too much of practices, which is actually makes mess in this sprint. So especially the sequencing estimation, which is actually create the mess.
So
Yeah.
if you were to, so I have a question on that. You're right, and it does, putting in too many techniques and too much information kind of muddies the water. So I'm curious, and maybe I'll start with you, Vivek. If you were to teach someone who's brand new to this stuff, and you were to teach them like three basic things, what
Yeah.
would you tell them?
Actually, over a period of time, what I've realized, I try to avoid the techniques conversation for as long as possible. You know, and I think my point of view has evolved, and now my focus is to go back to the fundamentals. And something that I start off with is that data is only useful in a stable environment. So if you don't have stability, then it does not really matter. You're awesome at estimating in points or hours or days or t-shirt size. You just know one more technique and you're still not confident with the data that you get. So what's the point? So I try to focus more on the fundamental that, okay, do you have a stable team? How long does it stay together? Do you have a team that's dedicated? So going back to the fundamentals, and I say that, okay, if you can try to work on those things, use whatever technique you like, you'll still be quite predictable, quite successful with that. But if those things are, you know, pain points and they continue to persist, then maybe you have just learned one more technique that you'll still struggle with and are not confident in making projection based on that. So I try to sort of first have a conversation around that. And once at least part of that, is able to make sense to the audience, then I start off with either the technique or something which they are most familiar with. So rather than me taking that, let's talk about t-shirt sizes or story points or hours or days, I'd say that, okay, which one are you most comfortable with? And we start there and generally, start the whole conversation from that point.
It is interesting you say that, and that you're diverting the conversation more towards the fundamentals as opposed to the technique and the how of the estimation. I mean, I'm sure all of us have read this book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, and one
Yeah.
of the, which is basically about systems thinking and all that, right? One of the principles I remember in that was something to the effect of, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but I'll do my best here. The point of the highest leverage in a system is often the least visible part of a system. And so what you're focusing on might not be the real problem. I like how you said let's focus on the stability of the environment, and everything else that is a moving part. Estimation is just the sort of after effect of that, right? Vishwa, same question to you. If you're coaching someone who's brand new to this and you
Mhm.
want to teach them like two or three basic things just so they can get off to the right start, what would you say to them?
Yeah, sure. And also, I would like to stick with the Vivek statement, what he mentioned about the foundation, right? So the foundation actually help us to build a long-term mastery, right? I strongly believe that, right? And also, this is help us to prevent from the overcomplication and maintain the consistency over chaos as well, right? So these are the basic approaches where I focus on it, right? Yeah, for the estimation related, when it comes to estimation, yes, I go with the data, which is evidence. So as a coach, we always prefer to go with the evidence, right? So yeah, like sometimes I go for the use case points and the team velocity estimation, and of course the wideband Delphi. Wideband Delphi is one of the parameters which were used for one of my federal projects, right? And yeah, of course, there are some dot voting. Dot voting is a very formal, very normal one for the forming stage of the team, right? So what I sensed is I normally coach the people with the dot voting, make it process simple, right? So and yeah, dot voting and the wideband Delphi is my I would say hands-on for the forming stage of the team to
Oh,
coach.
okay, something you said, Vishwa, it made me kind of think of something which is, I think, also it is going to take the conversation slightly a different direction, but also sort of related. And maybe we'll start off with Akash, your thoughts on this: data versus intuition.
Mhm.
Where can we use the intuition a little bit more than the data? When do we know not to trust the data and trust the intuition? Because this is a question that I get asked sometimes, and I think this is a great thinking exercise. That when do you feel confident enough to use your intuition more than the data that's presented in front of you, and the probability of that intuition being right than the data? So, I mean, any thoughts on that, or um, or have you dealt with something like that?
Uh, Akash, over
You're
to
on
you.
mute, Akash.
Oh, sorry, happens once in a while. Um, it's an interesting question. I never thought of it like that. But now that I'm thinking about it, I hate to give you the consultant answer of it depends, but it does depend. And here's why I say it depends. A lot of it, like you said, is about the stability of the environment, right? So if the things that you're doing are repeatable and you don't really need additional context, you don't really need anything besides historical data that you have. And what you're doing is completely standard issue, it is operational in nature, and whatever it was the last time, it's going to be the same this time and the next time and until the end of time. It makes it easier to break down those things and then put a label around them and say this will always be this much complexity or this will always be this much amount of time. But if things are progressing and evolving and things are changing, like if you're using some sort of I don't know, some sort of a complex system, as they say,
Mhm.
if you look at the Kahneman model, for example, right, what Dave Snowden talks about a lot. And if things are changing all the time, if the customer and the stakeholder that you're working with, if they're constantly changing on you, then it becomes difficult to use data all the time. I mean, it can guide you to a certain extent, but I think that that's where your skill and your competency comes into play. And the more experienced you are with things, I think the more you'll be able to, or your intuition will guide you in figuring out whether what you're guessing is in a low stakes environment or a high stakes environment. So if it's a low risk, high impact situation, okay, you can guess. But if it's a high risk thing like a compliance or a regulation kind of thing, you probably don't want to use your intuition there. You probably want to stick to some historical data because then you get into audits and you get into controls and things like that. So I think I'm going to retreat into a corner and say that it depends on the nature of your work.
Mm.
If the nature of your work for the most part is plannable and is standard and operational in nature, sure, I'll rely on data. But
Okay.
if the majority of your work is unplannable or unplanned, if you will, then I'll probably rely on a combination of data as well as intuition, which would be the result of my skill and my competency and my experience over a period of time. And this is kind of the sticky situation, which is difficult to write about or say
Yeah.
beyond a certain point because you have to kind of be in it. This is one of those things where, and I know Vivek, you and I have talked about this in the past. Some things in life people can't teach you, but you can learn it. And so this is one of those things where it can't be taught, but you got to learn it. And that comes as a result of experience and making some mistakes every once in a while. And hopefully you're not making catastrophic mistakes. But I'll yield the floor to you, Vishwa. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, it is again can be biased or inaccurate, but also it's a more insightful, right? So in reality, right? And yeah, of course, like sometimes like intuition can mislead due to a cognitive bias or the emotion as well, right? So yeah, sometimes as a coach, we need to sense the different aspects in the emotional intelligence as well with the team, how the team like behaving based on the scenarios, right? But what I feel is intuition is very fast and immediate response, very fast and immediate response. That's my
Thanks a lot for sharing that, Vishwa. So I think I'm just approaching it maybe from a completely different perspective altogether. I think where intuition helps me is when I'm overwhelmed with data. Because I mean, I think these days there's no dearth of data. I mean, you have so much data, how to make sense of it and what data is actually useful. And one may not even have enough time to, sort of scan through the whole thing. So I think the intuition, which is again combination of, as well Akash was saying, skill plus experience plus the decisions that we have made, right decisions, wrong decisions. I think all of that allow us to scan through, oh, we have 10,000 points and let's look at only these 150. So which 150 would be the right things to focus on. I think that's where intuition plays a big part. So I
Mhm,
think and even with when the stakes are pretty high,
mhm,
that intuition does come into play. It may not be, of course. I mean, when we are talking about evidence-based decision making, we are looking at what's there, what's historically, possible, what has been delivered, and that evidence is definitely required. But I think
mhm,
still, when you are crunched for time and you have to make a decision, then there's definitely that assumption that gets added, because then, I mean, in a perfect world, you'd like to have everything in front of you and then you make a decision. But,
right,
we don't have all the information a lot of times. So,
right.
So let's say that I'll get super tactical on this one for a second,
yeah.
right? Let's say that I am fresh out of college. This is my first job. I've been exposed to some kind of an agile environment. Pick whatever framework you want, Scrum, Method, Kanban, whatever, right? Some kind of an iterative framework where you're planning in short time windows and there's like quick feedback opportunities and all that stuff. So it's very collaborative in nature. It's a team sport, all of that stuff. I've come across these words like points and time and t-shirt sizes. Clarify this for me. What do I need to know? Give me the 2-3 minute teaching spiel of what is a point. Help me understand how it relates to a unit of time. Help me understand how I should use it for estimation. I'll start with you, Vivek. Tell
Yeah.
me, tell me what points are. What do I need to know?
I think before points, I think what becomes rather easy for people to understand if they're, just coming completely blank slate. I'm just hearing about these things. And, so I would start with t-shirt sizes. I would just say that, hey, we have different sizes of work. Something can be small, medium, large. Just think in terms of the work being able to fit it into a sprint, box of time. So now the challenge with the t-shirt sizes is t-shirt sizes are not additive in nature. So let's say this is the very first sprint, your team is able to finish one small, one medium, one large. You don't have any historical data, but let's say your team just said that based on our capacity and based on our skill set, we can select three things, and these three things are of different sizes: one small, one medium, one large. And let's say they actually finish that. That is your sprint one. So one way to look at velocity would be just, hey, we finished three things. That'll be the easiest thing. I would actually say that perfect. If you can sort of have that mindset, you're just counting the number of items, kudos, you're already there. But if the thing is that, okay, we have finished three different sizes of items, we have a small, we have a medium, one large. So in order
Mhm,
to calculate velocity in that particular case, it does not make sense. You cannot add t-shirt size. I mean, what sort of data are you going to plot from that? So the way I introduce points here is I would just say is that, hey, just use a legend where you replace the t-shirt sizes with some made up numbers. So for example, small is a 1, medium is a 3, large is a 8. I'm just taking the modified Fibonacci sequence, but if you want to use any other scale, let's say a doubling scale, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, so be it. But what it does is it replaces the t-shirt sizes with numbers, and numbers are additive in nature. And you can add numbers. And why people prefer numbers? Well, because you can make longer term projections. Then you can say something like, hey, what can we deliver by Christmas? We can deliver so many points because these are numbers. So I try to get into that sort of conversation. And generally, I think it's okay to understand. And there are sometimes follow-up questions, but on an average, I think, people are able to make that connection.
Let me double click on this for a second before I come to you, Vishwa. So you mentioned doubling of things, which is an interesting way of looking at it. And so it almost feels like over a period of time, you want the team to maintain some sort of consistency on the definition of those batch sizes, if you will, right? But my question to you is the number that you started with, that baseline essentially, all of these doubling is based on that baseline, right? What happens if that baseline changes? How do you teach your teams to keep that baseline consistent? Do you want them to keep revisiting that baseline, or do you say the baseline stays the same? How do you go about that?
I just say the baseline stays the same. It's just that over a period of time, you'll get better and you'll get more work done. So that'll reflect in the overall velocity, which is a good thing. And then it starts to stabilize. See, over a period of time, our knowledge increases, our skill increases. We get to know about the product, our work, overall, how to work with each other. And that's a reflection of our performance. So I would not go back and go to that baseline. I would just say that, okay, what used to be small for us earlier, maybe extra small now, but let's not introduce another element into the scale. Let's keep that as small, but maybe instead of one small, we can do two smalls. That's okay. So I think as long as the team kind of gets that and they are okay with that, I think ultimately what I'm trying to get to is that if you were to ask each other as team members, like sort of in unison that, hey, what's our velocity? And if everyone can be around the same ballpark, whatever metric, whatever thing you're using, that's working for you. But if people are saying different things, or they're saying, oh, I don't know about others, but this is how much I can do, then yeah, whatever you're using quite likely is not working. So I try to steer them to, to sort of think about that can you as a team get into a ballpark of a number or a metric that almost everyone agrees on, that yeah, we can do between 25 to 30. And if everyone's saying the same thing all together, that's generally a good sign.
Okay, interesting. Vishwa, same question to you. Teach me
Yeah.
estimation in a few minutes. What do I need to know?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it reminds me something like more than 15 years back when I was teaching the Agile for the one of the students in the Singapore-based university. So I just went through what not to do in the estimation first. So before I go to any of the numbering or anything, right? I just tell the people don't treat the points like hours or the deadlines. First of all, we have to be very careful about it, right? And don't estimate the alone. Always do it with a team. That's very much important, right? On top of that, if you're a fresher, so don't be afraid of to speak up or ask why this number. So sometimes people they don't know about like a why 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, right? And how do we make the modification, right? And then I go for the good practices. Okay, hey, go for the estimate relatively, compare one story to another, right? And focus on effort, complexity, and then unknowns, right? There are some four parameters, right? So before we go to the numbers, right, I coach them, okay, hey, there is a volume of the story, complexity, uncertainty. You need to think about these other parameters. On top of that, go with the data because again, coming back to Vivek's statement, what Vivek mentioned, right, about the intuition, right, data versus intuition. See, again, it is purely based on the our experience, right? Data, you will have some evidence. Intuition that is based on your experience, right? So evidence and the experience always is a blended combination for the estimation thing, right? And what not to do. So focus on what not to do. That's very much important here, right? Yeah, then I go with the some baselines like what Vivek mentioned about the some baselines, right? What is the scope baseline here? Why are we going with this particular X number, right? And what is the cost baseline, velocity baseline, and scheduled baselines, right? Yeah.
And by velocity, I assume both of you guys mean essentially the aggregated number of things that a team is able to finish in a certain time window, right? So
Right.
if they
The throughput
if they
or
said they would do 10 things and they finished 8 things, then their velocity is 8, essentially.
Right.
that
Right.
is
It's average story points per sprint. Yeah.
Got it.
Uh,
Okay.
whatever that
And
metric.
what is the benefit of tracking that over a period of time, Vishwa?
tracking for?
Tracking velocity, what would you say to someone who's new to velocity? What is the benefit of tracking that over a period of time?
Yeah, sure. So when you are maintaining the velocity, we can maintain the quality. For example, let's say the road speed is about 60 miles per hour, all right? So when you violate the velocity of the road, like you are just crossing the 60 miles, let's say you are driving to 70 miles per hour, what will happen? We'll be end up with the paying the ticket, right? I mean the penalty. So if you violate the velocity in the team, automatically people they just end up with the quality issues. The penalty will be the quality issues which is not possible to rebuild very quickly, right? So maintaining the rhythm, it is more into maintaining the rhythm. So when you are maintaining the rhythm, you can easily predict. On top of that, you can build the trust with the stakeholders, you can build the trust with the customers, you can build a very good rapport.
Yeah.
Got it. So velocity essentially is kind of speaking to the level of predictability you have with your
Exactly. True.
behavior and your work.
True.
I
It's a
see.
truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, I got an interesting question. I want to flip it over to Vivek for a second and talk about the same thing, but slightly differently. So, Vivek, we've both been in the engineering space, right? And we have often seen these metrics get weaponized by leadership in a lot
Right.
of different, right?
Right.
So you see a velocity as say 40 or 45, and the manager eventually gets used to it, and they're like, well, why is it 45? Why can't it be 50? Why not 55? Why not 60? Like, who came up with this idea of 40?
Yeah.
How do you coach the manager around what Vishwa just said, which is that consistency of it? Like, how do you show them the pros and cons of pushing at a certain level above or below?
I think something that is helpful, and again, goes back to how much historical data that you have collected over a period of time, you know, and and talking about the variance in velocity, sort of like, okay, this is the variance, this is sort of the low, and this is the high. If we are somewhere in the middle, that sort of shows us what is, um, what is practical, what is the team able to achieve. Because if you're always looking at just the highs, and we make a projection based on that, then quite possibly the team may be able to deliver all of that, but then going back to the quality, we may end up with the features, but they only work half the time. So the predictability is not just from a delivery standpoint, but also, what's your, so one of the things, and going into the metrics, like in the Dora metrics, is to look at how long do you have, what's the sort of the uptime and the downtime. So anytime something breaks, how long does it take for the system or for the team to quickly recover from that? So more bugs and defects you are going to have, the longer it is going to take. So
Mm.
that means longer it'll be that the system is not in production or your customer is waiting. So I think connecting that to the predictability of the velocity, that not always picking that, okay, why cannot be not at 50? Okay, maybe it can be 50, but then guess what? The team will start to take shortcuts. Shortcuts leads to mistakes, and mistakes are nothing but bugs and defects, so more downtime. So sort of like trying to make that connection can drive the message home. But I think this is not like a one-time thing, because of course, I think it's just the human brain. Generally, bigger number means better, and we are, you know,
Yeah.
subconsciously wired to just go in that direction. So I think just a constant reminder backed by data.
Great, great. So actually, Vivek, I would like to stick with a few things what you mentioned here, right? So normally in this scenario, what I'll do is I'll just start coaching our leadership. Like I start with the curiosity, not the critical, right? So I just ask the people, okay, what is the global, sorry, what is the global issues here, and what are the anti-patterns that you are seeing it here, and what are the goal which you are going to, I mean, what is the goal behind or using this metric, right? So I just clarify the desired outcome. I just help them to understand the shift from output, like a story points to outcome arise. And then as a coach, I just raise them awareness of again side effects, right? So I'll just reframe the metrics, and also I'll just provide some learning tools for them to understand. So I'll just create some common grounding so that they can speak my language, right? So leadership, they always love to speak the language of numbers, right? But I want them to understand my ground reality, right? So I'll just try to coach them what is my ground, and who are my battalions, and what is my battalion's performance, right? So I just start with it is more into the behavior pattern. I go with the behavior pattern. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. No, thanks a lot. But yeah, I mean, none of these conversations are simple or straightforward, uh,
Right.
and you have to constantly make sure that your foot is not off the pedal, because stakeholders change, new people come in. So the message has to remain consistent over a period of time. Yeah. But sort of coming back to that original point, and I think we'll also start to wrap it up, is about estimation in general. So my final question to both of you would be, where do you see this going? There's anything beyond points that you see, or just we leave the conversation right here, or sort of coming to the full circle? Because I'm thinking that I think it just comes back to the full circle, is just let's get back to keeping our work in smaller chunks and just count the number of items. So that's what I try to lead the conversation back to. But if you guys think there's anything beyond that, maybe some final thoughts on that, and we'll wrap this up. So Vishwa, if you
Go
want to
ahead,
go
Vishwa.
first.
I'll wait for you. You want to go ahead? I'll
Yeah,
go
go.
next. Go ahead, Vishwa.
No, actually, coming back about we just need to think about like discuss about monetary estimation where used like we are talking about only the IT, right? So what is the business forecasting? What is the manufacturing? What are the event planning, construction? So still we need to explore those area, not about only the agile estimation for the IT development, right? So yeah, we'll discuss about the analog estimation and the parametric estimation, 3-point estimations. There are a lot of things there, right? We'll discuss as we move on. Yeah, Akash, what do you?
I think that if I were to simplify this in my head, estimation is really about the outcome of modeling out the work well, right? So the more you know about the work, the easier it is for you to model it out. And the more you know about it is kind of based on maybe some of the data you have around it, maybe some of the experience you have around it, how much you know about it at the end of the day. And so whether you use alphabets or you use numbers to designate something as complex or easy, there are plenty of techniques around that. Some things you mentioned, Vivek, like establish a baseline. That's always a good idea. And so I do a version of that with my teams where I'll just kind of look at a backlog with them and say, all right, so based on what we see in front of us, pick one item that everybody on the team, regardless of your skill, experience, seniority, everybody on the team can agree. This item represents the easiest piece of work we will ever do. Something as simple as flipping a light switch on or off and the equivalent of that in your work, right? What is that easiest piece of work? That essentially, like you said, Vivek, is your baseline. Now you can call the baseline a one, call it an extra small, call it a star. The vocabulary is not going to be as important as the consistency of that thing, right? So like my native language will sound like a bunch of funny noises to you guys unless you understand why I pronounce words a certain way, why I stress on certain syllables and all those things. Similarly with your native language, unless I understand how the language is spoken, it will
Right.
just sound like a bunch of funny noises to me. And that's why when we see certain teams using numbers or alphabets or something else, we feel like, well, why are they doing it like this? Because that's the language that that team understands. So I think at a bare minimum, consistency is important, establishing a baseline, and then probably revisiting that baseline regularly so that you can figure out how much you have learned. Maybe the baseline has shifted. Maybe all of you agree that what was a one is a half right now, or what was a five is a one right now. As long as there's consistency around that, like the estimates don't have to be the same, but they have to converge beyond a certain point. And that's why when you say, a medium versus a small, okay, it's all made up. And so if you're doing it for the first time, be conservative, call it a medium. If you're doing it for the second time, you've got some frame of reference, be ambitious, call it a small, challenge yourself a little bit. And so as long as it's operating within a certain range, like you said, Vivek, it's 45 to 50 or 50 to 65. Or I think Vishwa, you also mentioned that control limit, if you will. As long as you stay within that, it's okay. Sometimes you do more, sometimes you do less. So estimations tend to anchor a lot of those advantages, if you will. And so those advantages are important to understand, whether it's, like you said, Vishwa, business parameter or something, or a customer satisfaction or something. So consistency is important. I'd say pick a metric system, whether it's alphabetical or numerical, stay with it and make sure that you don't go too big with it. As I'll steal from you, Vivek, either use a simple doubling technique or say keep three numbers and just go with those three numbers.
Right, right,
Yeah, I think, see, I think at the end of the day, estimation is so fascinating because we are trying to control time and we don't have any control on time, So
right.
I
True.
think whether we have this conversation again after a few years, there'll be certain things which will still be timeless. But I think great conversation. I certainly got a few new ideas that maybe I'll go back and experiment with. So I'm teaching a class tomorrow, right? So that I said it's day 2, so maybe I'll run a thought experiment with the group that I'm with, and use some of the ideas here. I mean, thank you a lot, gents, for being here. This was great. And for the folks who will be listening into this, this is going to be hopefully first of many of such conversations that you'll get out of the experts at Simpliaxis. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invite. Thank you.
Thank you.